You are your greatest asset.
Yes,
Yeah?
100%. If you look at all the assets that you have, 10% each year, or else your salary compounds, you're earning a certain amount, then it jumps up 20%, jumps up 30%. The individual and the salary that you make does make a big impact. Your salary isn't how you're going to get rich, but it's how you're going to make a start.
But you're making nearly half that net income. That's the money that you actually have to play with. And then you take out your lifestyle expenses. Like any business on a cash flow, it's what's coming in, what's going out, and what's left over. And quite often what I'm seeing left over is far too minimal to invest to kick in the extra $150, $200 a week to get this thing back up to neutral. They don't feel like there's that juice left over.
So after that first property, I was a lot more comfortable leveraging from that point. And the way I saw it was like, I have to run myself as an individual like a business. Most businesses have debt and equity. Most businesses can't run purely off equity. They need to borrow in order to scale and get bigger.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. You talk, I listen. One of the big things you tell me is that you want to hear from investors that have been there, not done that, been there, going through the journey. And I love it when we get clients that come on board, not to sing any praises for us. I've got an inflated sense of self anyway, mate. That's that you don't need to worry about that. It's more just to say, what has their journey looked like? What have they learned along the way? And just hearing it from someone that, call it a peer, so peer-to-peer type learning, that's where I guess you get those big breakthroughs. I'm really pumped because Alex Lee, like I was saying before, we had the pleasure of knowing each other scarily for nearly 15 years.
15 years
it's wild. I can't even think back that point, mate. Both of our lives were very different then. So yeah, I'm bringing in Alex Lee. We'll unpack our journey, how we got to know each other as well. And mate, I'm like a proud big brother. I've seen you grow up, and I'm proud of you, buddy, because you've done some amazing things. But yeah, purely for context, mate, look, our paths crossed when we're back at probably uni.
I was in uni. I think you were quite early in your career, starting out.
Yes.
You're working at a big bank at the time.
I worked at CBA. Yeah, there you go.
I was just at uni trying to find a job, really. And I did a BSOC, so Business Society mentoring program. I got paired with you.
Yep.
Had no idea sort of about professional life and jobs out there. Just trying to get interviews, really. And you came through and helped me out with like resume, interview techniques, that kind of stuff. Eventually got a job. But yeah, that was the first instance where we met.
Yeah, nice. Don't you look back and go, those simple times, right? Like the hardest challenge you had there was how to structure your resume.
Yeah,
now we'll talk about where you are with your career and you're solving much bigger problems, which obviously results in a great paycheck. But I think like a good foundation for that is how our paths cross. And I look at younger grads and I'm like, the competition is intense, right? To get out of the work, to get out of uni, it's a level playing field. Everyone walks out with pretty much the same piece of paper. But from my perspective as an employer, what I'm looking for is not the piece of paper. Sometimes it's the attitude that it's very hard to quantify that or even articulate that in an interview.
Yeah.
So how do you put your best foot forward? And I think, yeah, mate, you've obviously done exceptionally well, but
I try.
Yeah, no, don't try. Don't sell yourself short. But I guess if you look back in your own journey, what's kind of those, career wise, what's some of the big breakthroughs that you've got?
Career wise, I guess, it's more about people. Getting to know people, getting to understand how I guess they think and how they feel and how interactions with them really count, more so than the technical abilities that you have, to solve a problem, the technical abilities to put numbers in a spreadsheet, valuations and all sorts of like different things you can do on a computer. What really matters is just the connection you build with your manager, your colleagues, even in an interview, connecting with the interviewer. At the end of the day, people want to work with people they want to work with.
Spot on.
Right.
Spot on. Mate, well said. I can only say that because we've done a big round of recruitment in our team. And I think the resume quality, and maybe because I've, again, like you said, I helped you build out your resume. Maybe I've got a real B in my bonnet over the resume quality. Just even the formatting, geez, I mean, we're going a little bit off topic here, but I'll bring it back. It's like, I have this saying for me is how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you're not putting your best foot forward, I literally get maybe 10, 20 seconds for a resume for me to look at. If I'm seeing typos, I'm seeing mixed fonts, if I'm seeing no formatting, there's a level of sloppiness that I equate that to, just going, do I really want this as someone that I want to trust part of my business to as well, right?
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Cool, mate. So we met at uni. You then kind of catch up with coffees for me in the big smoke when I'm in the city with a suit on, and then I see you kind of get your entry point into corporate.
Into the market, yeah.
So what's been your career journey? What does that look like?
So firstly, started off got a couple internships with your help through the interview process. Ended up getting a grad spot at CBA as well.
Yeah.
Rotating to different teams for 2 years. Then ended up moving to UBS, which is an investment bank. Was there for another 2 or 3 years. Moved over to a credit fund, a global credit fund called Bentham Asset Management.
Yeah.
Was there for a good 6.5 years, where I learned a lot. That was probably where I learned the most, just in terms of my career, soft skills, technical skills. It was a great learning point. And then from there, in my current job at Velocity Trade, where I'm an FX trader. But yeah, that's sort of my career so far. And in between there, got a couple of properties.
Yeah.
I guess just initially didn't go with you.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized you had a business at that point in time. I went with CBA because I was working with CBA.
Yeah.
And then went through a broker to refinance. That experience wasn't the best. And then I remembered, and I saw on social media, and I saw like updates in your life that you started your business, and I thought, I know Aaron's a good guy, good bloke. He cares about me as like a mentee at least. So then I thought, yeah, I'll give you a go, see how the whole mortgage broking sort of works. And then yeah, it just came on, and it was super helpful. Second and third property again used you, and it was great. The service that you provided was just amazing, and there was a very big difference between, I guess, your level of service versus the other broker that I had. I guess with any industry, there's just different qualities of people doing their business. And yeah, it was just very helpful. You cared about like where I wanted to take my wealth and how I wanted to position myself. Something that stuck with me at the time was you were saying not to over leverage, which I guess depending on the brokers and depending on the situation, they may push you to go like above your limit. So it was definitely something to consider when you told me that. It definitely helped just throughout my career and throughout, I guess, the time I've been investing.
Oh, nice one. Thanks, mate. Look, I appreciate the kind words. It's not what we're here for, but I thank you very much for the sentiment, mate. Thank you. I want to get back to, you said something about Bentham's. I had the privilege of coming in one time to meet you guys over at Bentham's and the team. And you said that's probably where I learned my most. And people go, hang on, you worked for CBA and you worked for UBS, like really big businesses surrounded by very smart people, but somehow in a smaller environment, smaller team, it's where you probably had that biggest learning trajectory. Take us through that, because I hear this all the time where I think even in like, I think I've listened to Diary of a CEO. There's been a few podcasts where I talk about that career. You can take a few risks when you're younger. You can take a risk on an unknown business. You're gonna land on your feet versus you're just a cog in a big system when you're in a large bank or large institution. So take me through big bank, great foundation.
Yeah.
But how come you learned so much at Bentham's, for example?
I guess just with the bigger banks, so CBA and UBS, massive organizations, great people that work there. But I would say like everybody, when they're working there, sort of has their own job and they're focused on themselves. There's not as much, I guess, accountability because the business itself is not owned by the people that are working there, a lot of them at least. Whereas with Bentham Asset Management, it's a small team. I think at the time there was about 10 people, 12 people, something like that. And everyone came into work and everyone cared about the business. So when you have people that care about the work they do, they want everyone around them to do well as well.
Nicely said.
So they tend to, I guess, focus a lot more on learning, developing the individuals. You get to see from front to back the whole sort of life cycle of the job. It's not just focused on one aspect. You literally have access, or in my case, to the portfolio manager. I also was able to speak to distribution, understood things from the middle and back office. So the whole spectrum of the business I understood. Um, and I guess you get a lot more closer with the individuals that you're working with, because I guess the turnover rate is a lot smaller. With larger organizations, you have people coming in and out, within a year, 2 years. After maybe like 3 years, the team's completely changed. With Bentham, the team there was the same pretty much throughout the whole time I was there.
Awesome.
So you do get closer, and they care more about your own development, and people will just tend to, I guess, help you and want to help you and see you grow.
I think it's a different individual that wants to be part of a lean, mean team like that, versus, big business is a little bit safer, for example. And I think others go, right, I want to roll my sleeves up. I want to get amongst it with a leaner team. Everyone's heard of UBS, but not everyone's heard of Bentham's, for example. But there's some beauty in kind of, you guys were punching well above your weight. So there's size-wise smaller, but you still guys did some amazing things, right? Yeah. So I think what that message there is, don't be afraid to take some career risks. If you're going to a small business now, small businesses are a double-edged sword. Like I was speaking to someone yesterday, they're working in a small accounting business, and the owner of that business, they'd ask him a question. He's like, I don't know, pass. And you get a mixed bag of business owners at that point, where some leaders can really inspire their 100%. Team. Some leaders can really see the best in their team and want the best for their team. And others are just like your minions. You're here to do what I say and don't question, or they're not investing into their team. So there's a real level of growth that happens in an organization where they want to see you do well. It's a philosophy that we've got, at our business, where I tell the team, if we're investing for clients, you've got to make sure that you're investing for yourself. Show me your P&L as a individual. Show me your balance sheet. Show me your asset position. What are you doing to actually move the needle? Don't just come and take a paycheck. Actually, just personally develop, grow, and to a point that there's nowhere for you to grow internally. You have to step out to get an amazing opportunity next, which is what you've done, right?
Yeah. That's exactly the case.
Yeah, nice. And during that time, you've obviously added a string to your bow, which is some extra study as well.
Yeah.
That's no easy feat for what you've done. Do you want to share?
Yeah. I guess after uni, I was in sort of accounting and investment banking sort of industries. Bentham is more on the wealth side, but during that process, I got my chartered accountancy. And my CFA as well.
Yeah. So it's not enough just to do CA. You've got to go bloody CFA as well. I think it's got like a failure rate of 70% or something, doesn't it?
It's a big failure rate.
Yeah.
It's just something for me, from a professional standpoint as well as personal. I enjoy learning and developing, and just having a good understanding of the work that I'm doing, at least from a technical and theoretical point of view. It has helped in my career. It's also helped in my personal life. With the CFA especially, for those that don't know, it's part of it is about wealth management. And in that wealth management section, you learn a lot about the different asset classes, so the property, equity, fixed income. And something that I learned during that sort of segment of the course is diversification of your assets, as well as how the different asset classes have historically performed. And something that I've learned during that course specifically that I wouldn't have otherwise learned is that property itself is an investment. It's a hedge for inflation. So generally speaking, when inflation goes up, your property values will go up. Same thing if you have an investment, your rental income will go up at the same time. So with the, I guess, environment in Australia, where it is such a big property environment, and part of that is due to the regulation and tax of it. Essentially, if you don't have a property, in my opinion, you're sort of short property. So again, sort of how I've viewed my own wealth, and when I've been speaking to other people, my parents, other colleagues, like having one property is sort of the base case for most individuals in Australia. Otherwise, I think you've heard in the media, you kind of get left behind and it becomes harder and harder to buy
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, you're spot on, mate. Yeah, so for those that aren't in the financial world, when you talk about being a hedge
Yeah.
for inflation, it's very much you're riding the wave. You're riding the wave with property ownership,
Mm.
right? You kind of it will go up. But probably, and when you talk about the other asset classes, shares, it's probably less volatile than your shares, for example, or
Yes.
moving to say something like crypto. Yeah.
100%. It's a lot less volatile. Um, in saying that, volatility can can work both ways.
Mm,
Can have like unbelievable profits and gains, as you can see in the crypto market in some shares, you know, 10x sort of
mm,
situations. But at the same time, that money could go to zero.
yeah.
Whereas property, even though it's not as volatile, you might not get as big of a performance in and gains. You're also not going to get massive losses either.
Mm,
And like as I mentioned before, just with the tax system in Australia
yeah.
specifically, there's a lot of tax benefits for having property. Um, Again, specifically to Australia, if you talk about the US, if you talk about places like Singapore, where the regulations and tax is completely different, I would probably recommend you not to buy property because there's all these added costs. I think in Singapore, there's massive taxes on your second property. So
Mm,
that's why most people in Singapore don't have investment property because it's just not worth it for them living in Singapore to have a second property.
mm,
Whereas in Australia, you don't have that. Yeah, probably, you hear about negative gearing. That's one of the main reasons why people will invest in property. Also, just things like migration. Australia is generally net positive in migration. People are always coming in, they have to live somewhere.
yeah.
So again, just that's sort of how I see the property market. And to me, like everyone should get into at least one property, otherwise they're gonna get left behind.
Yeah. I think even when you say you can have one, I still think that's a little bit you're selling yourself short by having one. I think at this point, if you buy one and it's compounding, you've got the ability to buy two,
Mm.
right? Income dependent, but I reckon most people have that scalability. You get to two, now you got two properties that are compounding, you've got the ability to get to four. And then you get to four, and you can start to see here, the compounding is doing the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
Now what you got to do is make sure that you're keeping your lifestyle in check. And that's probably where the big part comes into it, Alex, which is incomes go up, lifestyle goes up. Because I've seen, I know I got a great view on everyone's numbers. Because I've seen your income increase as well. How have you avoided lifestyle creep, or have you put a check in that, or do you just go, look, I live according to my income now?
For me, I think I guess I've always had a good understanding of finances.
Mm,
I've been very conscious and aware of, I guess, my finances and my wealth, partly just because of how I was raised with my family. And so,
Did you come
um,
from a level of affluence?
I wouldn't say it's a level of affluence, but I didn't need to worry
Yeah.
growing up. I had no concept or idea of, I guess, wealth as I was growing up,
Mm,
and that probably shows that, like, we weren't in a bad situation.
sure.
Um, but from when I started working, and then building up my own personal wealth with my job and with my investments, something that I always had envisioned was property for me wasn't to get money quick.
Yeah.
I saw it as passive income. As that grew, as the asset grew, and on paper, I'm, worth however much the properties are growing up to, I'm more looking at the uh, cash flow that comes in. The way that I kind of view it, I'm also quite frugal.
Mm.
Um, Anyone that knows me knows that I like a lot of free things. a lot of freebies, a lot of loyalties, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I would like to say I'm smart with my money.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna spend a lot of money, on a pair of shoes, or big night out, or super expensive dinner. To me, I do sort of what makes sense. And again, I don't have a tight budget.
Mm.
It's more what makes sense to me and how much I can afford. And if I go on holidays, I'm willing to spend.
Yeah.
Um, I think just for everybody, they kind of need to look at where they want to spend their money. And I want to spend my money when I go on holidays.
Yeah. Cool.
So my day to day, it's probably, hasn't really changed too much from when I started working.
Yeah.
But the holidays that I take is very different from when I first started.
Nice one.
And I guess that's sort of how I've managed to make sure I'm not overspending.
Yeah, cool. Thanks very much. Yeah, I was having a chat to someone else the other day, and I was like, as your income goes up, there's things that really define where you kind of sit. So some people will have an increased income, and the cars get a bit nicer, the watches get a bit better, the clothes get a little bit better, and that's they're spending their money that way. No judgment. Some people then, as their income goes up, they'll invest, whether that's into real estate, whether that's into shares, put into super. They're finding ways to put into investment vehicles. But what I'm finding is, again, as good smart money is when people invest back into themselves, whether that's health, well-being. They can get a personal trainer, they get some gym memberships, they're eating better, and there's a whole health and well-being that comes with that. I call that wealth being. Like you are your greatest asset. Like you look at the income that you earn, for example, you are your greatest asset.
Yes,
Yeah?
100%.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that I learned at CFA.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at all the assets that you have in your lifetime, the biggest asset's probably you as an individual, because you're earning however much each year, and that all compounds for like a 40-year career.
Correct.
Whereas a lot of assets aren't earning more than like 10% each year. Whereas your salary, it compounds. You're earning a certain amount, then it jumps up 20%, jumps up 30%. So the individual and the salary that you make does make a big impact. But I guess as from experience and from the stories you hear, like your salary isn't how you're going to get rich, but it's how you're going to make a start.
Yeah, nice one. Nicely said. Yeah, I think the salary part for me is probably where I see it becomes a real double-edged sword. Like someone on 250K gross is living an income at 250K gross versus what are you actually earning net and what are you living off? Because the banks will lend at a gross income, right? Versus you got as a household, you got to manage this as a net income. So if you're thinking I'm living life at a 250K income, but you're making nearly half that, probably just a little bit over half that net income, that's the money that you actually have to play with. And then you take out your lifestyle expenses, your fixed living expenses, whatever else is coming out. And like any business on a cash flow, it's what's coming in, what's going out, and what's left over. And quite often, what I'm seeing left over is far too minimal to invest. Or when you go to invest, and positive properties might be negatively geared to kick in the extra $150, $200 a week to get this thing back up to neutral. They don't feel like there's that juice left over to then put into investment properties. But knowing we need to invest, but you need to actually have the cash flow to invest as well, right?
Yeah. 100%.
How have you handled cash flow in your portfolio?
I guess cash flow for me, I guess right at the start, just knowing that I'm not over leveraged was like super important for me, just like mentally as well as financially. I didn't want to borrow too much where I can't make the serviceability and make the payments each month. But sort of after my first property, I sort of backed myself to say that like in my career, I'm going to earn more money. I'm going to get the salary increases. I'm going to get the promotions. So after that first property, I was a lot more comfortable in leveraging from that point. And the way I saw it was like I have to run myself as an individual like a business. Most businesses have debt and equity. Most businesses can't run purely off equity. They need to borrow in order to scale and get bigger. So as an individual, having that first, mortgage and seeing the value of that increase then reassessing as a business would do and say, can we afford to get more debt in order to make more assets and more income? And as you've were initially asking in terms of cash flow, that's sort of the most important part, where if you're not managing your cash flow and you're not being able to pay your mortgage payments, then you're going to get into a lot of strife. So just making sure sort of at minimum I can make those payments, then I think I should be fine.
Yeah, nice. I think you said something important there, which is the first one's probably the hardest one.
Yes.
After that, I feel like things went into another gear for you. Where I feel the confidence started to pick up. I think you also learned those things to not worry about, particularly rate.
Yeah.
With the first one, it came down to equity. Like literally, it's like, how much equity can I pull out? Great, let's go again. And you have that benefit where CA and CFA 90% no LMI.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've got this
That
awesome lever to pull, which is all you need is 10% to get into the market. Even for people that don't have those, 10% is all you need to get into the market. So take me through, how's your mindset shifted from that first one being this is a bit of a mountain to climb versus now you're like, are they just numbers on the page, or do you still have a little bit of angst when it comes to equity strips, go and buy again? What's
so
been your
at the
experience?
moment, with the property portfolio that I have now, I'm sort of like comfortable where I am with having 3 investment properties. Um, so getting up to that stage, I was very fine to start leveraging more.
Yep.
Now I'm considering again holistically for myself diversification. So I have X amount in my super. All my assets are pretty much in super or equity.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And then I have my own sort of equity portfolio, which is X amount. I've got then property, which is X amount. So for me, right at this stage, I think I've got a pretty good percentage of my wealth in equity and then also in property. The next time I do look to buy, it would probably have to come with, the equity portion also increasing with the property. So again, I don't necessarily think it's all just about the numbers on the page and being able to strip out whatever equity just for the sake of buying more.
Yeah.
For me, it needs to make sense.
Yeah.
I know for other individuals, it makes sense for them just to continuously go through the same process. But again, they have a different mindset. They've got a different sort of strategy. They again may or may not look at their whole portfolio and different assets together. They might have just fully gung ho on property and will just only invest in property. But again, I think it's more of my nature to look at diversifying my own wealth in that way.
And I think that's important. Like everyone's going to have a slightly different, you call it risk appetite or approach to investing. Some people like yourself like a bit of diversification in their portfolio. Others like, no, I'm all in on one asset class. I know I'm going to invest in only what I know. There's no wrong or right here. Hey, do what you need to. Some people don't have the means or the ability to go and invest in other asset classes, but I mean, you can get into shares for very small amounts. I think sometimes I see younger clients get into shares, accelerate their ability to save. That becomes a deposit to then go and get their first investment. So multiple ways to skin a cat is what we're trying to get at there as well. In terms of buying, locate, negotiate, for example, did you use a buyer's agent to do? Did you do this yourself? What's been your experience?
I've done it pretty much for myself.
Yep.
I think back at the time when I did buy it, either I was ignorant to the fact that there were buyer's agents or there weren't any buyer's agents really. To me, that's sort of job and role. It seems like it's been very popular over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But again, back when I did buy first property about 10, 13 years ago, that concept was so foreign.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much myself looking at properties, looking at where I wanted to buy, different factors like, is it close to good public transport? Is it close to different facilities like, pools or parks, that kind of stuff. And then I was specifically looking for apartments.
Yeah.
One, just because of the amount that you have to and pay out for the deposit. But two, I think in my mind, apartments are probably pretty good investments in certain locations. Like you're
Because you're
always
Sydney.
going
I
to
mean,
get
you predominantly bought Sydney.
yeah, all within Sydney.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the main things was that it was close to public transport, close to facilities, and in areas that I thought would also start building out. Um, just from construction, and light rails and train stations being built over the years.
Mm.
That sort of council planning is something that I look at as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it has helped, at least for my investments.
Absolutely helps. I mean, it's funny because you talk about diversification, right? And someone listening goes, "Hang on, mate, all your 3 properties are in, they're in Sydney.
Sydney.
That's concentrated." As opposed to you going, "Hang on, look, I'm, I'm not diversified location wise. I'm diversified asset wise,
Yes.
asset class." So, if you're listening, going, "Okay, they're seeing that, hearing a maybe different message." Some people love the idea of having their properties interstate. Some people go, "Look," and we've had plenty of buyers agents research where it shows you can be agnostic to the location. You can be agnostic to apartment versus freestanding house, for example.
Yeah.
I'm saying there's no right or wrong. We're going to cover plenty of guests that will say, "Hey, I'll buy apartments and they'll do very well." Others are like, "Look, who cares if the house is red in regional areas? We're buying it. It makes
Yeah.
sense on paper." Yeah. So for you to pound the pavement, look at properties. If you cast your mind back to that journey, what's some of the things that have worked well for you? What's some of the lessons or setbacks that you've had in your own personal journey?
Yeah, I guess something that I learned and I did at the time, because my investments they were for investments. They weren't for owner occupied.
Yeah.
I didn't have like a bias or an attachment that I had to buy a certain property,
Mm.
which worked well for me because when I got up to the stage of negotiating a price, I sort of had like my own budget or valuation that I was willing to pay for a property. And, I think 2 or 3 times, the agent would come back saying, we have another person who's interested. They're willing to pay X amount. So I didn't really get into the stage of having to go to like some sort of bidding war
Mm.
with another person. I was like, okay, well, if they're willing to pay that amount, I'm happy for them to buy it because I'm not going to be paying, any more than I've already told you.
Mm.
And then I think in one of the properties, 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a call back from the agent saying, that buyer actually hadn't they had issues with getting financing or something,
Mm.
and the owner needs to sell it. So if you're still open to buying at the price you've said, then they're happy to sell. And at that stage, I told him like, I'm looking at other properties. There are some others that I'm interested in. I unfortunately can't pay the amount that I said initially, so I gave him like a slightly less offer. And again, I think they were just needing to sell. They accepted that offer. So in my eyes, I've just saved, however much
Yeah.
less. Um, but again, it's very specific to my situation where I didn't need to buy a property that I needed to move into as an investment. So sticking to sort of my own valuations and strategy of negotiating, if you want to call it that,
Mm.
that helped.
Yeah. Thanks.
I guess something that I learned, but at the time, didn't go so well, was probably like having the right people in place in terms of mortgage brokers and uh, accountants and like lawyers and stuff at the point where we needed to buy or needed to get some advice. Especially for the first property, it was like
Mm.
didn't really know what I was doing. My parents helped. They do have a couple of properties, so they gave me advice as to who to use and such. But I didn't have that full trust in those individuals because I've never really worked with them.
Mm.
So in the second and third property, I spoke to you, you helped out, and then I've had, I guess, more more connection and more meetings with other individuals to help with getting strata reports and building reports and that kind of stuff to do my due diligence. And it was a very easy, seamless process. Like I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was speaking to an old colleague who was going through his first property that he wanted to buy, and he came to me asking for advice because he had no idea about the type of due diligence he needed to do. So I was sat down with him, walked through like you should probably look at the strata report, look at if there's anything, any issues with the building, any issues with pests. You can talk to the people in the apartment block and see if there's any issues with the plumbing and that kind of stuff, like sort of things that he obviously had no
what
idea
you don't
about.
know is what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I guess more on the point of having people around you that sort of know and have gone through the purchase of properties definitely helps, because you can ask them questions and definitely help out.
Nicely said. You'd meet, I mean, you're a young dude. You meet people around you that go, mate, Alex, I'll never get into the market, especially the Sydney market. You bought 3, for example. Like, geez, mate, how'd you do it? What's your advice to someone that says that?
I would say, like, if they're struggling to maybe have if they're struggling to get serviceability, I'd say look at your budget. Like, actually look at your finances, see where you can stop spending in certain areas. I'd also say think about the lifestyle that you do want to live. If you want to have a house and a big property and in the eastern suburbs, then you have to make certain sacrifices to be able to afford that. But if your end goal is just to have something quite small and quaint, something to call your own, in suburbs that's not as affluent and it's not as expensive, then look at those areas. Like, you don't need to compare yourself to everybody around you. And again, as I said before, I look at myself as a company in terms of having debt and equity. A lot of people that I speak to, they don't want to have debt, and that's their biggest sort of mindset issue. But I think in Australia, that's just how it is, right? Different countries, different situations. You don't need debt in certain countries because the banks the banks can't afford to lend you out 7, 8, 9 times your income. They'll only let you borrow 2 to 3.
Correct.
I think back in the day, like before I was born, when my parents were looking to buy property, interest rates were what was it, like 17%. But no bank's going to lend you like 6 times, 7 times that amount when the interest is that high. I guess their main issue is getting the deposit. So a different situation, different problem, but in today's sort of world, I don't think there's a real big excuse to not be able to buy property. It's just about the location. It's about how much you're willing to spend, how much debt you're willing to have. I think I might have mentioned it to you last year. There's now companies coming out that are willing to lend you the deposit.
Yeah.
So the deposit that you actually need is only like 2%.
Correct.
Which in my mind sounds a bit crazy, but like if there's a market for it and those companies are willing to take that credit risk and lend it out, it seems to be working.
Mate, we've had them on the potty before. I mean, look at Coposit, look at Beth Camino. There's companies that I think there's another one that I've got access to. It's not mainstream, and they're literally funding deposits. And I think you've nailed it, which is people don't want to have debt, but they still want to invest in property or buy property. Like how? I'm at a stage in my life where in 40s, and there's people that I get to meet on the weekend at soccer fields, and as soon as they ask, what do I do in finance? Oh, geez, man, I don't want a mortgage. So what? You're happy to rent, but you're not actually financially moving the needle, or because you've got some aversion to having some debt.
Yeah.
with all due respect, mate, debt gets me up in the morning, gets me to work. And I think some people are wired that way, whereas others just like this, which is why I probably have very little affiliation to the FIRE movement. Financial independence, retire early. What are you going to do when you retire early? I genuinely feel you're actually going to cut your lifespan down. The ability to go to work, contribute to the economy, use your brain mentally. I've got no qualms if you want to have a good lifestyle, work a little bit less, find a passion project. But the notion of, I don't want to have debt, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And in 15 years' time, when your kids say to you, that property in Sydney was only $1.5 million, you're like, yeah, it sounded like a lot at the time. Because I used to say it to my parents all the time. I was like, the house near us was like $220K. I was like, why didn't you buy 10 of them? Like, that was a lot of money. 220,000 back then was a lot of money. And we'll lose perspective of that, but it'll be a point where like we'll look back and 1.5, even though Sydney now becomes the most expensive housing market in the world, we'll look back at some point and goes, that was cheap.
Yeah.
Won't we?
100%. And I think the other thing that people might forget is that the banks aren't going to lend you, and lenders aren't going to lend to you if they think you're not going to be able to pay your mortgage off.
A mortgage is an asset. Like, so that's where the shift is. You look at a balance sheet, you go, right, it is a debt. I'm not sugarcoating that or misleading, but the ability to borrow money, the banks deem you worthy enough to give you a loan.
Yeah.
And so that becomes, and if you look back in time, go back 4 or 5 years, your ability to borrow at that level, some people can't borrow at that level today. So you've actually got an asset because you've been able to have a balance sheet stronger than what you could do today. And so if you can understand and connect that dot and go, right, maybe I've just got to do some deep work. And if you go back to, say, my episode with Jody, my own personal coach, for example, episode with Jane and Fraser, where if that's something that's innately in part of you, where you have this aversion to debt, that's maybe a dragon that you need to slay personally. Or if you've got a partner, you've got a couple, and one person says, I don't want to take on that debt, and you're saying, well, it's the only way to grow wealth. Maybe you need someone to come in and like a financial counselor or even a marriage counselor at that point to go, let's unpack this a little bit more, because we actually cannot grow as a couple without having us being on the same page as well.
I also think, like, just in that, with that comment, like, people say that kind of, they're in that situation where they're not comfortable having debt. And they want to be in a different situation. The same way people will say they're not happy in their job. I would tell them, like, if you're that unhappy, if you can't not comfortable with that debt, then maybe you should actually live somewhere else where you can afford a house. And maybe, the lifestyle is even better to how you want to live.
Yeah.
Like, we don't all need to live in Australia. We don't all need to live in Sydney. People have options.
Right.
Same thing with a job, same thing with a lot of things in life. Like, you think you're stuck in a situation, but there are a lot of options that people have if, if they open their minds, open their eyes to see what they can and can't do. Most people will, they force themselves to think they have to live in Sydney. They have to live in a certain area, and then they can't afford it. But, half an hour down the road, you could possibly buy that property that you wanted to live in. It's just not in that suburb.
Okay. Yeah. Mate, you could, with a digital nomad visa, you could live overseas. You could live in an amazing country like Thailand. Like my mate, one of my best buddies, he was in Thailand for a number of years. Mate, quality of life was fantastic for him. Could still work an Aussie job, could still work those hours, but could order lunch for $2.50 delivered to his door.
Yeah.
The shopping was delivered to his door. So yeah, it's to your point, mate. If you expanded your horizons and just gone, right, the eat, sleep, work, pay mortgage, repeat, if that's something that's not appealing to you, there's a great article in the AFR recently, the work from anywhere phenomenon, right? So if the right employer will allow you to live and work from anywhere as well, scratch the itch. Like, if you're not happy, to your point, mate, I love it. Change the narrative. But you can't change the narrative by complaining about it. You got to change the narrative by actually doing something about it.
Yeah, 100%. If there's something that you want out of life, like, just go for it. And have, it doesn't need to be a massive big change initially. do your due diligence, make some small steps towards it. But I think most people will be surprised at how easy and quickly it'll turn out before they can actually, have the life that they want. But it's just about making that first step.
I mean, this has come from, I mean, we were talking before about some of the work that you're even doing, like on the side, which is career coaching.
Yeah, I want to get into career coaching and
Yeah.
mentoring. Like way back when you were my mentor,
Yeah.
I found that I appreciated that a lot.
Oh, thanks.
And at my point in my career, I want to be in that position where I'm helping others who are a bit more junior, a bit more younger, who don't necessarily have all the answers. Help them out, do be successful in their career, especially earlier on. But I guess the way that I look at it as well, it's hopefully more than just career advice, but it's hopefully helping them make decisions in their life where again, if they're not happy in their job, maybe they should look at a different career, or maybe they should, stick it out because the lifestyle that they want requires a certain job with a certain amount of pay.
Yeah.
So to me, it's more of a holistic, like, look at what you want out of your life and then sort of work backwards from there.
Nicely said. I was even listening to a really good, because Sam Gordon's got his 1% podcast. He did an interview with Jack Delosa, who runs the Entourage. And he was saying, as we get on in life, you expect it to get, inverted commas, easier. And so that things, when things get hard, that's like, that's it, I'm out of here, I'm going to bail. Like when things get hard in your job, that's it, I'm going to bail. It's like, that's almost the time that you need to step up.
Yeah.
And we've kind of built this rhetoric that it's like, I want an easier, better life for myself. Therefore, that equates to things not going, things going my way.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real element comes out investing in property. May you get to 3 properties, you get to 10 properties. That's a step up. Like there's a scalability that comes with, and now responsibility that happens with 10 properties. You're getting independent legal advice. You're multiple entities. You're seeing your accountant far more. There's tax depreciation schedules. There's 10 tenants to now come. There's 10 property managers to come at you. But isn't it better to own 10 and have a better quality of life at that point than have 3 and struggle there, for example, and go, right, that's the best it's going to get. It's like, well, hang on, I actually have the ability to grow and scale to 10. Why aren't I taking this shot? And that's probably been the big turnaround for me personally, which is, why do I want to play a small game? Why do I want to sit here where it's a level of comfort? Growth only happens from a level of discomfort. And you've got to be willing to push the boundaries, because if you're not going to take those shots, you're not going to get the points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for you as well, just how I've sort of seen your career grow, that's sort of the mindset and the reason why you built your own business with the Atelier, rather than just, staying at CBA, being a mortgage broker for somebody else. I could sort of see that you wanted more. And so, you started your own business and you built it up to where it is now. Some people, depending on what they want, don't want to have their own business. They don't want all the responsibilities. Some people don't want to have a great lifestyle, so they don't need to earn a lot. They don't need to have 10 investment properties. It's more, again, I think, how people want to live their life, their lifestyle that they see themselves living. Some people are very happy not to have any property and they just want to, be able to live wherever they want, and they can get by with, not much income. That's just sort of the lifestyle they want to lead. And it's definitely, to me at least, understanding yourself, understanding your loved ones that you do live with, like your partner, like what type of lifestyle do they want, and then sort of, again, work backwards from there.
Yeah, Matt, I got a really good mate. That's exactly the point. He's kept his lifestyle to where it's manageable, that he doesn't have to work extremely hard. He can choose to freelance or choose to do work. He can literally bounce around country to country. And that to him is like the ultimate enjoyment in life. Like he would absolutely be insufferable if he had a mortgage. And that's cool. Like, I'm his best mate. I'm a mortgage broker. He just can't understand why. I'm not here to convince you. If you're happy with your life and there's a level of conviction that comes with that, play on. Like I'd say play on, man. And no social norms have to be pushed onto someone else. Like the only way you're going to live is by having an investment property portfolio or owner occupied. It's like you do you, boo. But as long as you like that level of comfort is there, and that I've got clarity in what I want, for example, that comes out. Whereas if you have that and you've got this, I don't know, it's a disconnect between, but I still want the big house. Like you have to take some major moves to get there.
Yeah.
It's not going to fall in your lap just because you want it. It's like trying to eat bad calories and expect a good bod, right?
Exactly.
You're doing something else expecting a different result. The math isn't going to math.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mate, thank you very much. We covered a lot of turf. In terms of your next steps in building out a portfolio, where do you go from here, mate?
So I think in terms of my property portfolio, probably wanting to buy a property that I live in, like forever
Yeah,
home.
nice.
At the moment, the 3 properties that I do have are investments.
Yeah.
So that next step is, finding a place that I want to live in, build a family in that property, and
Nice.
hopefully not need to move out.
Yeah.
I know some individuals, they buy a place, start a family, and then they sort of move from place to place and get bigger and bigger. Hopefully I can buy one place and just sort of live there for 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah, nice.
That's sort of how my parents did it.
Yeah.
They still own the property that I grew up in.
Fantastic.
And I visit them all the time in that same property, and everything's exactly the same when I left.
Yeah, nice.
So that's where I hope to, the next property I buy will be that forever home.
Good on you, mate. Excited to see what the next chapter has in store for you, mate. Thank you very much. It's often, we tell clients that want to come on, hey, we're not here to unpack the entire portfolio. And some people are happy to disclose their numbers. I didn't want that for us. I think the discussion I wanted to have is zoom out a little bit. How have you gone from 0 to 3? How have you built the portfolio? What does it look like when you reflect on the journey, mate? But I want to say kudos to you, buddy. Really appreciate it. Cool. Thanks for coming out here, mate.
Thanks for having me on.
Good on you. Like anyone, if you're starting out on the journey, be like Alex, like, what moves do I need to make? I think those people will attract opportunities, just like you open doors. And if you want to share this episode with a partner, with a friend, someone that you know that's trying to get into the market or build their portfolio, I think this episode's a real cracker. So that's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. We'll talk to you soon.